Hey everyone, welcome back to another Roman Reacts. We are here today to watch another video from the Fat Electrician. This one is a recent video that he came out with not too long ago. It's called America's Savage Submarine Commander, Mush, Morton, and the USS Wahoo. So it's gonna be very interesting to say the least. And don't you worry, we're actually going to be watching a bit more Fat Electrician videos this coming week, along with some other videos as well. I'm kind of getting my groove back into the swing of things, trying to get myself oriented to be able to do more content for you guys. And yeah, we're just going to be having some fun here, having a good time, and let's just get on with it, okay? So this is a pretty long video, so we got ourselves a bit of a popcorn bowl. Bit of a soda, not sponsored. Wish I was. But also, we're going to be giving this, since this long video a watch, if there's something that really piques my interest, I'll pause it, I'll keep an eye on it, and just maybe leave a comment or two. Normally, I try to be as quiet and respectful for the video as possible, but if you guys want me to try to, like, perk up, talk, and just mention something here and there, then let me know. So anyway, let's get to it. All right, we got that set and it's all good. So the USS Submarine Ace, the USS Wahoo. I'm actually really curious now, so let's give this a watch.
During World War II, submarines accounted for approximately 2% of the United States naval fleet. Despite that, they are credited with sinking 50% of all enemies, totaling over 7 million tons. And this is how.
I'm curious now.
Today we're talking about Dudley Morton, aka Mushmouth, most commonly referred to as Mush Morton. Ladies and gentlemen, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they crippled the United States Navy. The only thing that really escaped unscathed was the American carrier fleet and the American submarine fleet. The carriers avoided destruction because they were conveniently not at Pearl Harbor that day, and the submarine fleet escaped because they were deemed a low priority target. And that is because at this point in time, submarines were deemed almost exclusively a defensive weapon. But as the old adage goes, necessity is the mother of invention. America would forge new battle tactics, and a new breed of hyper-aggressive submarine commander and crew would be born. Incredible legendary warriors like Eugene Lucky Flucky and his crew of the USS Barb, Lawson Red Ramage and the crew of the USS Parch, and Dick O'Kane, the crew of the USS Tang, would all step forward and become heroes. But they were following the footsteps of the prototype, America's first hyper-aggressive submarine skipper, Mush Morton. A man that was originally deemed too timid and conservative to be an effective submarine commander, that was given a second shot at command for the sole reason that his commanding officer, and I quote, liked the way he shook hands.
Come on, bring it in there. Tuck that.
I'm in there, dog. I'm in there, dog. I'm in there, dog.
You tucking it in there? What you tuck, dog?
And with that second chance, he would take a defensive weapon and turn it into one of the greatest offensive weapons in history, changing warfare forever. And we're going to get into it right after a word from our sponsor.
Delete me.
Why do you have an ACOG on a lever action?
Nick, there's rabbits and deer in my garden.
All right, that explains the ACOG. Why does it have a suppressor?
The boys are napping.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. This video is brought to you by Delete Me. All right, here's the deal. Super simple, straightforward business model. You give them money, they turn around and make sure the data brokers on the internet aren't selling your personal information.
Really quick, when it comes to submarines, the submarines are basically the epitome of like dangerous attack dogs of the sea. Germans basically had the same thing when the U-boats basically were hounding the British merchant ships and trying to stop supplies from getting to the United Kingdom at the time. And basically, I'm guessing that there's going to be a lot of talk about something like this mentioned as well, but possibly the United States probably took a different method to this approach as well. So yeah, let's just give this a watch.
Information. What does that even mean? Okay, here's the entire internet and every free service on the planet inside of a nutshell, okay? There's a saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. What that means is pretty much anything on the internet that you use, that's a service, whether that be Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of it, okay? It's all an app, so one of two things is happening. They're either gonna feed you ads, and that's how that company makes money since their service is free, or they're gonna collect your personal information, then turn around and sell it to data brokers on the internet, and then they're gonna turn around and sell it to whoever buys analyze it, and next thing you know, you're getting 17,000 robocalls every single day. And that's where Delete Me comes in. They will look through all the major data brokers and find the ones that are selling your personal information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf, and then they are legally obligated to comply. And then they'll continue to monitor these data brokers, and if they get your information again, Delete Me will submit an opt-out request again. Basically, you're paying Delete Me to get rid of all the downsides of all of the free stuff on the internet, which I think is absolutely worth it. If you want to check them out, I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
Dudley.
Our story begins in 1907 in Kentucky when a young Dudley Morton is born. He also had a brother. His dad worked for the coal company and had to travel a ton for work, and his mother suffered from a chronic illness that...
Really quick, with coal miners, people do keep forgetting how dangerous that work is at the time. They had to basically go into these big mine shafts and these tall elevators coming down deep into the thing. It's cramped conditions. They're working the guts out trying to dig and mine all this coal to put it onto mining carts and trying to get it back up to the surface, and also trying to prevent cave-ins as well by putting metal, not metal, but like wooden beams to like shove into place so that the roof above them would not collapse. So props to them for being coal miners. It's still a dangerous business, but like people have been improving upon it to make it better.
Had her hospitalized fairly frequently. As Dudley and his brother grew up and became more energetic, more rambunctious, and more rebellious, his mother being sick and his dad being gone for work all the time, they simply could not manage to keep these boys under control, and they were forced to send them off to Florida to live with their wealthy aunt.
Looked at my kingdom, I was finally there to sit on my throne as the Prince of Bel-Air.
While attending high school in Miami, Dudley was kind of like the archetype of the all-American kid. He was handsome, he was good looking, he was super popular, he played football, he was a standout wrestler, he was just the guy. After graduating high school, because the wealthy aunt and uncle were connected, they were able to secure Dudley a spot at Annapolis, the United States Naval Academy. While there, his classmates would give him his nickname, Mushmouth, because they said it always sounded like he was talking with a mouthful of mush, and he had a famous party trick where he could supposedly fit 5 golf balls into his mouth and then recite Shakespeare. Also, while attending Annapolis, he would have his first run-in with what appears to be the main storyline, because as he continued to be a standout wrestler at Annapolis, he actually almost made the 1932 Olympic team, but in the selection finals, he was beat out by a man that he had previously beaten 32 times in a row. The main storyline shall not be interrupted, apparently. From there, he goes on to graduate Annapolis in 1930 at the age of 23 and is commissioned as an ensign. After his commission, he gets stationed over on the West Coast on the...
Ensign or ensign? Ensign. There's a big difference.
USS Saratoga, which is an American aircraft carrier, and while he's on the West Coast, he starts attending all these Hollywood parties, rubbing elbows with all the rich and famous people, has the time of his life. A couple of years after that, in 1932, he gets stationed on a heavy cruiser, the USS Chicago, and then a year and a half after that, in 1933, he volunteers to go to submarine school. While at submarine school, he kind of develops a reputation for not being the guy that does everything by the book. He doesn't really care for strict regulations, and he doesn't care about the dog and pony show that is the United States military. One day, the cadre at the submarine school decides that they are going to go through and they are going to search the officers' quarters, including Mush Morton's. He's kind of understandably pissed by this. Like, this isn't basic training. He's not some 18-year-old kid trying to hide contraband. He's a 25-year-old man that graduated from the United States Naval Academy. Why are we digging through my room like I'm a child? So he decides, fuck this. I'm going to get me and all my other officer buddies. We're just going to go rent a house in town and we're just going to have a party house and do whatever the fuck we want all the time, and then we'll show up for school in the morning. His house ends up getting referred to as Stud Manor, and it is known for being a party pretty much 24/7. Despite that, somehow Mush Morton and all of his buddies living in this house had their grades actually start improving, and when he was asked how that was possible, he said it was simple. They had a strict policy. There was no women and no booze from midnight on Wednesday until after exams on Friday, and the rest of the time was just one huge party.
My advice to you
Okay.
is to start drinking heavily. You better listen to him, Flounder. He's in pre-med.
So he graduates from submarine school, ends up getting stationed on an S-37 submarine over in Manila. While he's over there, he ends up meeting an art student that's on vacation from Chicago. They end up getting married. Her name is Harriet Nelson. Then in 1939, at the age of 32, Mush Morton becomes the executive officer of the USS Fairfax, an old World War I era submarine. If you don't know, executive officer is the second in command.
Destroyer.
In addition to that, in the same year, 1939, Mush Morton and Harriet have their first kid, Douglas. Then in 1940, Mush Morton is given command of a submarine, the USS R5. It's this little tiny old sub from like 1918. Shortly after that, in 1941, Mush and Harriet would have their second child, their first daughter, Edwina. Then on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor and America is now at war with Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. Shortly after that, Mush, Morton, and the USS R5 get their first chance to engage the enemy. They're over in the Atlantic and they spot a German U-boat that has been devastating American supply lines. Now, the important context here is this is a new era German U-boat. This is one of the most sophisticated submarines on the planet, and the USS R5 under the command of Mush Morton,
I did mention the U-boats earlier, so
is a tiny, shitty little submarine from 1918 that has almost no combat value, but they're being put into combat anyways because after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the submarines are all America has.
It's not the size, mate. It's how you use it.
But Mush Morton's gonna do the best he can with what he's got, so he sneaks up on the German U-boat, gets within 4,000 yards, fires 4 torpedoes, all 4 of them are misses, and he orders a sub to dive underwater to try to escape this German U-boat because there's no way it's gonna be able to engage in direct combat. Later, Mush Morton would heavily be criticized for not trying to chase down that German U-boat and sink it, but again, he's in the USS R5, he's completely outmatched and outgunned. Why would you chase down your own ass whooping? So, Mush thinks he made the right decision, but a lot of the other officers are thinking maybe he's too timid, he's too conservative, maybe he's even a coward. Regardless of what those other officers think, his chain of command is like, okay, fine, fair argument. So, if you want a modern sub, we're gonna give you a promotion to lieutenant commander, and then we're gonna send you back off to school so you can study war tactics and actually learn how to engage the enemy. So that's exactly what he does. While he's at this school learning to be the commander of a modern sub, he hates pretty much everything they teach. They're essentially teaching these guys to use submarines as a defensive scout, right? They just want the submarine to go out there and kind of like spy on people, and if they get an opportunity to fire a torpedo where it's like guaranteed 100% safe, they can go ahead and fire a torpedo and then sink back down and get away. But Mush Morton is like, no, let's go take the fight to the enemy. Let's go destroy supply lines. Let's do guerrilla warfare underwater. But he also knows that nobody's going to listen to him because he's, you know, too timid and too cowardly, and that's a crazy idea, and he's throwing the entire doctrine upside down. So he just kind of bites his tongue, goes on, graduates the school. From here, he's hoping to get put in command of a new Gato or Baleo class submarine, which are the best submarines America has at the time. That's not what he gets. He gets put in charge of the USS Dolphin, which is an old rust bucket that's barely seaworthy at this point in time. It's lost its ability to shoot torpedoes. All he has for weapons is a couple of 5-inch guns on the deck, and he's basically just supposed to go out in the ocean and shoot at enemy airplanes. It's essentially a waste of time, but the United States government's trying to use every single tool they have, but Mush Morton is pissed.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
This ship is basically a death trap. He knows that, and he tries to tell his chain of command he doesn't want it. And his chain of command gets super pissed at him. His direct commanding officer ends up saying, you know, with your record of cowardice, and now you're saying that this ship isn't good enough for you, I think you're being a coward again. So he fills in the paperwork to have him yanked out of submarines entirely and tries to have him reassigned to a surface ship. Obviously, Mush Morton pushes back against this, and it goes all the way up to Admiral Babe Brown, the top dude in charge of him. And he goes in, has a meeting with him, and Babe Brown decides to give him a second chance at being a submarine officer. He's not going to be a commander right away, but he's going to continue being an officer on submarines. And his reasoning was, and I quote, "I liked the way he shook hands."
Slap hands, maintain a nice firm grip on the hips, and pose. It's just a nice feeling between you and your teammate.
And with that handshake, Mush Morton is assigned to a new Gato-class submarine, the USS Wahoo.
Wahoo!
So he reports to his new ship. The USS Wahoo is under the command of Commander Kennedy and the executive officer, Dick O'Kane. Mush and O'Kane immediately hit it off and become friends, and it doesn't take long for Mush to realize that not many of the other officers really care for Commander Kennedy. The guy had previously been a commander of a surface ship, didn't know a whole lot about submarines, whereas Dick O'Kane had been in submarines for years and years and years, and Commander Kennedy refused to listen to anything he had to say. Commander Kennedy was overly cautious to the point that he was just doing dumb shit aboard the USS Wahoo that made life miserable for the entire crew. Okay, I need you to understand this is a diesel-powered submarine. Okay, so it's got diesel generators. Those diesel generators charge a bunch of battery banks, and batteries require water. So having a lot of fresh water on a submarine was always a huge issue until this new Gato class, because the commander Cheng Li was placed in charge of getting shit done for the United States Navy, found out that they had developed these new distillers and had these distillers put in all the new Gato class submarines so they could make as much fresh water as they needed. Okay, this was huge. This meant that the Gato class submarines were always going to have fresh water for the batteries, and on top of that, they were going to be able to make more, so the crew would actually be able to have showers and wash laundry and do all the shit that would make life not as miserable while you're sitting under the water inside of a metal tin can with a bunch of other dudes sweating your ass off. Commander Kennedy, though, is like, well, those distillers use power and power uses fuel, so I don't really trust it. We're just not going to use the distillers, meaning we're not going to do laundry and we're not going to have fucking showers on this ship, even though the government just spent presumably millions of dollars getting us those capabilities to make life not as shitty aboard the ship. But Commander Kennedy's just like, nah, I don't trust it. The only fresh water we're going to have to do that shit with is we're going to take fucking buckets and stick them under the air conditioner condensers and catch all the dripping condensation. And that's going to be the fresh water that we're going to use.
What?
So the whole crew is obviously just pissed. It'd be like if your dad bought you a new car and then your mom told you to walk to school anyways. It's complete bullshit. On top of that, Dick O'Kane and all the other high-ranking officers can't stand the guy because he doesn't trust them at all. He literally has his bed put up on the bridge, so he's always there, and he makes it his policy that there has to be 2 officers on the bridge running the ship at all times, which runs all those officers absolutely ragged. Dick O'Kane and all the other officers are getting 4 hours of sleep a night, and that's if they don't run into any enemies. It's just a complete nightmare. Regardless, they set sail, they get sent out to the Buka Strait, which is where a bunch of Japanese supply lines are going through, and they're supposed to disrupt the enemy. So they're on the Buka Strait near Bougainville, and they've been out there, they're just looking for Japanese ships. Everything's kind of going according to plan. And finally, Mush Morton's had enough of this no taking showers bullshit. He sends the order to some of the guys, fire up the distillers. I'm gonna take a fucking shower. So he goes, he grabs his bright ass red bathrobe and starts making his way towards the showers. Right as that happens, the alarm goes off. The USS Wahoo has spotted a Japanese convoy. So Mush Morton runs up to the deck. He's in his red bathrobe as shit's about to hit the fan. So he gets up to the bridge. Dick O'Kane and Commander Kennedy are up there as well. There's a rainstorm going on. There's lightning. You can't really see shit. The waters are rough, but there's an enemy convoy like 4,000 yards away, and they are in perfect position to set up an attack and potentially sink all 3 ships. Dick O'Kane wants to approach on the surface, being disguised by heavy rainfall and rough seas, and they have the right angle. But Commander Kennedy, wanting to be ultra conservative, is like, no, we're gonna dive now, and then we're gonna track him down using sonar, even though that there's, you know, rough seas and lightning and a bunch of other shit going on. That's just what he wants to do, and he's in charge, so that's what they do. The ship dives down, and within a matter of minutes, they've completely lost the Japanese convoy. And now Dick O'Kane is fucking pissed. He's been in submarines forever. He knows how to set up these attacks. His commander does not know as much about submarines as him, and he absolutely refuses to listen. So he kind of goes, he confides in Mush Morton, and Mush Morton is like, dude, look, I completely agree. We need to take the fight to the enemy, get in their face, and basically do guerrilla warfare on the water. But in defense of Commander Kennedy, it's kind of sort of not really his fault, because this is exactly what they teach these guys in this submarine warfare school that I just got back from. They want them to be ultra conservative and do everything 100% safe. From this point, Dick O'Kane and Mush Morton kind of come to an agreement that they're going to document everything and try to get Commander Kennedy kicked off this ship so they can get a new commander that'll actually listen and actually get them in the fight. Like a week later, December 7th, 1942, they come up on another Japanese convoy, and again, Commander Kennedy kind of gets panicked, doesn't want to approach on the surface, orders the ship to dive. They lose the target again. The next morning, they spot another convoy, 3 Japanese ships. Again, Kennedy gives the command to dive and goes underwater, but they're still going to launch torpedoes at this convoy from underwater. Maybe it'll work out. But the problem is, Commander Kennedy doesn't trust any of his other officers, even though they're more experienced than him. So he's trying to man the periscope, man the sonar, oversee all the targeting data, and be a one-man show. He just refuses to delegate and trust the dudes around him. So they've got the enemy in their crosshairs, essentially, and everybody's just kind of standing on the deck watching Commander Kennedy run around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to do everything by himself. And they're like, he's gonna fuck it up again. He's gonna miss it. We're never gonna do anything in this war. We're just gonna sit here and watch this guy fuck up everything the entire time. But Commander Kennedy actually kind of pulls it off. He gets the targeting data on one of the freighters, fires 4 torpedoes, 3 of them hit the freighter, huge explosion, sets the whole thing on fire. At this point, everybody on the deck is shocked, like, holy shit, we actually fucking did something. At this point, Dick O'Kane is like, okay, fucking grab the next ship. There's 3 of them. Let's fire at the next one. And Commander Kennedy's like, no, dive deeper. And then they just kind of sit there, let the destroyer come, drop depth charges, trying to take them out. Now the whole submarine's getting fucking rocked. They're not fighting back. And it's just like, okay, well, at least he did something, I guess. They survived the depth charges from the destroyer. Dick O'Kane and Mush Morton are like, okay, cool, let's fucking set up another run and go sink another one of the ships. And then maybe we can take out this entire convoy. And he's like,
no.
Nope, that's too risky. Let's fucking leave. So they dip out. A couple days later, they come up on another Japanese ship. Commander Kennedy opts to dive and sneak up to it underwater. Whatever, I guess. So they sneak up on this ship. They get right on top of it. They're ready to fire torpedoes and sink this fucking thing. And Commander Kennedy's like, nope, we're not going to fire torpedoes. Everybody's completely shocked, like it's just in the crosshairs. All he has to do is say fire, torpedoes away, and they're going to sink this fucking ship. And he's like, no, technically we're in another submarine's AO, so I don't want to like take one of their kills, which is completely fucking ridiculous.
Sir, we won't tell anybody. What difference does it make? We have a perfect shot. Just let us take it.
At this point, Dick O'Kane is fucking furious, and Mush Morton can tell that Dick O'Kane is actually about to go punch the skipper, have mutiny, and try to take over the ship. And Mush Morton just kind of like gives him the signal, like, just fucking calm down. We'll take care of this. I got it. So Dick O'Kane chills for a minute, and they just keep going forward. From here, they go back, they make port, they do the whole mission debrief, the whole 9 yards. Commander Kennedy goes into his boss and is like, things went good. We went out, we sunk a ship. It was a good war patrol, huge success, great job. Then he leaves, and then Dick O'Kane and Mush Morton go into his office and they're like, how do you guys think it went? They're like, yeah, we sunk a ship. We could have sank fucking 10 ships. When asked directly by the Admiral what he thought of Commander Kennedy, Mush Morton responded, and I quote, this man is a yellow-bellied son of a bitch and should be relieved of command. The entire room goes silent. Commander Kennedy gets relieved of command, and now Mush Morton is the commander of the USS Wahoo at 34 years old. Also, while this is going on, Mush Morton and the rest of the crew are catching up on all the news that's been going on while they've been off on this war patrol, and they're finding out about all the atrocities the Japanese are committing in the Philippines, Manila, all over the Pacific theater, how they're killing Americans, how they're torturing innocent civilians, and a hatred for the Japanese grows inside of all of them, especially Mush Morton. And that's partly because he was stationed in Manila for a while. He loved that city, he loved the people there, and now they're under Japanese control and they're being tortured. In addition to that, they received word that Dick O'Kane's former submarine, the USS Argonaut, had been sunk with all 110 men on board, and now he wants revenge too, and under Mush Morton, he's gonna get it.
Mush.
So Mush Morton immediately gets to work getting his crew.
And I remember talking about watching a video upon the sea of Manila, basically, where a lot of the Philippines, the people that were under Japanese rule, they kept having this guerrilla fighting against them, and like there was even a prison camp that the Americans saw that they needed to like. They basically need to get there fast to rescue them, otherwise people were going to die. And the commander basically snuck in through like a limo, and he managed to get through the Japanese lines, and they didn't think nothing of it. And he managed to get to the Philippines guerrilla fighters, and then been able to just work with them to be able to get the weapons, the munitions, the intelligence, anything they need to be able to harass the Japanese as much as possible. And when the main invasion force arrived, we were able to come in and rescue the prisoners, but also stave off the Japanese counteroffensive to try to take the prisoners. And it was quite a daring feat.
And the submarine ready for battle. He goes in, has the commander's bed taken off the deck, clears up way more room on deck for everything else that actually needs to fucking be there. He takes the captain's mast book, that little book that the previous Commander Kennedy was writing down every little transgression a sailor did so he could punish them later and didn't forget, throws that shit in the trash, has pin-up posters of hot women put all over the submarine, and has a placard put inside of each bay that says, "Shoot the sons of bitches." He tells his entire crew, you're not calling me Commander Morton, you're calling me Mush or Dudley. We're leaving rank at the dock. As they're getting ready to set sail, Mush addresses the entire crew. He gives a speech and he basically tells them, look, every trail of smoke, every hit on the sonar, we are going to investigate, and if it is a Japanese ship, we are going to engage and destroy them. This is going to be like no other submarine run that has ever been done, and it's going to be dangerous, and for that reason, I do not want to take anybody that's not a volunteer with me. I've given the yeoman authorization to have you move to a different ship if you want. You have 30 minutes to go report to him. I will have you transferred off my vessel. Nobody's going to judge you for it, but this is your time to get off my ship if you're not a volunteer.
I will help you bear this burden.
You have my sword, and you have my bow.
And my axe.
Nobody leaves. Everybody's fucking pumped. it's game time. January 16th, 1943, the USS Wahoo departs from Australia on its third war patrol and the first war patrol under Mush Morton. As soon as they get underway, Mush Morton continues to change absolutely everything. He does something that is unprecedented. He informs Dick O'Kane, his XO, that he is going to be the one manning the periscope. Okay, that doesn't seem like a big deal. It's a huge deal. Nobody fucking does that. The periscope belongs to the captain of the ship. Okay, nobody touches it except for him. He's the guy looking through the periscope. He's the guy making the decisions. But Mush Morton has a different idea. He wants to be the one sitting back, taking in all of the information. He wants somebody manning the periscope, reporting back to him. He wants the sonar guys reporting back to him. He wants the targeting guys reporting back to him, getting all the information and making the decision. He is essentially going to be the computer, not the sensing objects. This is what is going to allow Mush Morton to focus on the overall big picture of the complete battlefield and not get tunnel vision inside the tiny viewpoint of the periscope. And again, it still kind of seems like, okay, that's not that big of a deal, but to all the officers involved, this shows an unprecedented, never before seen amount of trust that Mush Morton is putting in the officers beneath him. And it is a level of the ability to delegate that nobody has ever seen before. Now, the mission that the USS Wahoo's been sent on is a reconnaissance mission. You got to realize the chain of command probably didn't want to give Mush Morton some big, dangerous mission on his first go. They're going to give him something easy. Go do some recon, you know, establish yourself as a leader, get some experience under your belt, and then we'll send you out to go do some dangerous stuff. But as Mush Morton said, if we see an enemy, we're going to sink an enemy. He's out to set a tone, not to spy on people. So he is sent out to a place called Wewak Harbor off the coast of New Guinea. This area is deep inside of Japanese-held territory. They have airstrips, harbors, supply lines. It is a Japanese hub in the Pacific at this point in time. And because of that, they haven't been able to get a lot of aerial reconnaissance or any reconnaissance at all. So they don't even have a good layout of the geography. And that's what the USS Wahoo is supposed to be doing. On their way there, a member of the crew comes up to, you know, the XO and the commanding officer, Mush Morton, and is like, "Sir, this is going to sound dumb, but I think I have something that might help us." This crew member, while they were in Australia on leave, had went out and purchased a children's geography book, like an atlas, and he was going to take it back home and give it to his kids as a souvenir. And inside of this atlas, there was pretty detailed maps of Wewak Harbor. And they were actually like significantly better, more detailed, and showed islands that the US military maps didn't even have on them. So now Mush Morton finds a guy in his crew that was an amateur photographer that has some experience with this type of stuff and gets him to be able to project the two maps over each other and get them to scale, and recreates a new, more detailed, more accurate map of Wewak Harbor. And just like that, mission accomplished. That was the whole objective that they were being sent out to go do, and they're already done. Side quest, let's go fuck shit up. January 24th, 1943, the USS Wahoo sails straight into Wewak Harbor, gets within 30 miles of a Japanese airstrip, on the surface traveling 20 knots. They're not even submerged. Now, to the crew, this seems crazy. Like, okay, we had Commander Kennedy that was way too conservative, and now this guy's a complete 180 and he's being a little bit reckless. But Mush Morton realizes that the water here is so shallow, they're only going to be able to dive to 90 feet. So even if they were submerged and an aircraft flies over, they're still going to be able to see the submarine under the water. So there's no point in traveling at 3 knots when you could be traveling at 20 knots if you're visible either way. So if you can't be sneaky, you might as well be fast. So they're hauling ass on the surface through Wewak Harbor, and they come up on a Japanese destroyer. It's like 4,000 yards away. They look at Commander Mush Morton and is like, "Sir, you want us to shoot some torpedoes at it?" And he's like, "Absolutely, but let's get right on top of it first." They look at him like he's absolutely crazy, and they're like, "What?" They're Japanese. They're never going to expect an American submarine to be inside their own harbor this close to take a shot. To which his crew responds, "Yeah, I wouldn't expect us to do that either." So they sneak up within 1,700 yards, at which point Dick O'Kane is looking at Mush Morton like, "Bro, are we going to fucking take this shot or not?" It's a bullseye at this point. And Mush Morton says his new catchphrase, "Anytime, Dick." They fire 3 torpedoes, 3 hits, break the back of the Japanese destroyer, sink it instantly. Mush Morton then immediately orders a dive. They dive down to 90 feet, slip out of enemy-held territory. 12 hours later, they resurface. Morton cracks open the massive store of booze that he had loaded onto the ship, and they have a party. Then 2 days later, on January 26th, they see smoke on the horizon. Better go investigate what's going on there. So they chase them down. They see a Japanese ship. They dive to periscope depth. They start maneuvering into position, and it's actually 3 Japanese ships in a convoy. It's 2 Japanese freighters and a large transport called the Boyu Maru with no escort. This is a perfect target. Dick O'Kane gets lined up on the first freighter. Mush Morton hits him with the "Anytime, Dick." They fire 2 torpedoes, immediately pivot, fire 2 more torpedoes at the
It's like, "Anytime, Dick."
other freighter. The first freighter gets hit with both torpedoes, starts sinking immediately. The second freighter gets hit with one torpedo. The other torpedo misses. Now, with the second freighter only hit with one torpedo, it's not enough to actually sink this ship, but it slows it down. But the freighter does something unexpected. It turns directly towards the USS Wahoo. It's going to try to ram the sub and cut it in half. Mush Morton doesn't panic. He just grins and says, and I quote, "Shoot that son of a bitch down the throat." Okay, this is unprecedented because a down the throat shot is when you're shooting straight on at a ship. Okay, the ships are arched in the water like this. You have to hit a dead ass bullseye, because if you don't hit it right at the front, it's going to glance off the side and the torpedo's not going to explode and hurt the ship. So this is a low probability maneuver, but this is Mush Morton and Dick O'Kane. As the USS Wahoo's maneuvering to line up this perfect shot, one of the crew members accidentally fires one of the torpedoes prematurely. The Boyu-Maru, not the freighter, the transport, sees this coming towards it and veers out of the way for fear that it's coming for it instead. And this exposes the Boyu-Maru's entire broadside, at which point Mush Morton and Dick O'Kane are like, fire 2 more right at the broadside of that big ass transport. Fire 2 torpedoes, 2 hits, cripples the Boyu-Maru. It's going down now too. Problem, we still got this slow ass freighter coming to cut us in half. So Wahoo lines up this shot again, fires 2 torpedoes at this freighter right down the throat. One of the torpedoes detonates early, and the other torpedo is a direct hit but doesn't fucking detonate. Mush Morton and the Wahoo have just had their first run-in with the infamous Mark 14 torpedo, which in early World War II absolutely fucking sucked. They were going off too early. They weren't going off at all. They were a pile of shit. Mush Morton gives the command. They dive as fast as possible to 100 feet, and the freighter drives right over the top of them and keeps going, trying to get away, traveling at like 3 knots.
I missed you, Mama. Speed, Ricky Bobby, back! What are those things?
The Wahoo resurfaces, but the batteries are drained. They're not going to be able to catch this freighter, so the Wahoo turns its attention to the crippled Boyu-Maru, the huge transport, fires 2 more torpedoes. Another one's a dud. The other one detonates right below the smokestack, breaking the entire back of the ship. This ship is full of Japanese soldiers, sailors, and Indian POWs, and they all start diving off this ship as it rapidly starts sinking. From here, the USS Wahoo's on the surface. They've got the generators running, trying to recharge the batteries. They're going to chase down this freighter later, and Mush Morton makes the most controversial decision of his entire career. The crew of the Boyu-Maru manages to get about 20 life rafts out and floating on the water, and Mush Morton, realizing that his standing orders are unrestricted submarine warfare, makes the decision that he's going to go out and take out all of those life rafts. They are in enemy territory. These guys are going to get picked up by another ship. They're going to get taken into Guadalcanal, and all these Japanese soldiers are going to be used to kill American Marines, and Mush Morton's not about to let that shit happen. So he pulls up next to all these life rafts and has his crew get up on the deck with a bunch of Tommy guns. Now, are you allowed to shoot at the crew of a downed ship? No, you're not. That's a war crime. However, you are allowed to shoot at the life rafts that they're inside of. And that is exactly what the crew of the USS Wahoo does. They open fire on these life rafts, trying to pop them, dismantle them, and that way these guys are going to be lost at sea. But the people on the life rafts start returning fire, at which point they're now enemy combatants and they're fair game too. Now, the extremely unfortunate side of this is that on that ship there were British Indian prisoners of war as well, and they are caught up in the crossfire. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but we do know in hindsight that the Boyu-Maru had about 1,100 men on board, and during the entire engagement, from the torpedoes hitting, the explosions from that, the sinking of the ship, the elements, drowning, and the gunfire, approximately 282 people died, both Japanese soldiers and POWs. Japan would later use this incident as propaganda, as a justification, saying that America was all a bunch of violent war criminals and that we were not abiding by the rules of war. And because of that, a lot of anti-war people would buy into the propaganda and also agree that Mush Morton was in fact a war criminal. Now, was this a war crime by today's standards? Maybe. Was it a war crime by World War II standards? Absolutely not. Not even fucking close. And you know what? Even if it was, guess what else is a war crime? Attacking Pearl Harbor, okay? Don't start none. There won't be none. Talk shit, get hit. Okay? And that absolutely sucks. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles, okay? In war, sometimes good men have to do bad things to bad men to keep those bad men from doing bad things to good people, and that's just fucking how it goes. War sucks. After the crew of the Wahoos finishes shooting at everybody that was shooting at them and destroying the life rafts, gas, they've got enough energy in the batteries, they start chasing down this last ship. And by the time they catch up to it, another freighter has caught up to it, trying to help this one out, and now they have 2 targets again. Problem, the USS Wahoo only has 4 torpedoes left, so they line up the shots, they fire 2 at one freighter, 2 at another, end up breaking the backs and sinking both of them. At this point, the USS Wahoo is out of torpedoes. They are out of ammunition only 23 days into this war patrol, when the average war patrol lasts like 70 days. So they're out here kicking ass. They have no other option but to head back towards Pearl Harbor. On their way there, they run across another Japanese convoy with no escort.
What is that? What is that?
Now you gotta realize at this point, this is the most successful war patrol in American history, all right? They went out, they sank 5 ships in 23 days, and they're out of ammo. Might as well put a cherry on top, right? So he comes up with a plan. They're gonna rush into this convoy, force them to scatter. He's gonna pick off the slowest one, and they're just gonna track it down and fire the 5-inch deck guns at it till they sink that one too, trying to make their total 6 ships in one war patrol. And the plan starts to work. They go in, convoy breaks up just like Mush Morton thought it would. He picks off the slowest one, starts chasing them down, firing the 5-inch guns. He's gonna sink this ship with the 5-inch guns. And then 10 minutes into firing with the 5-inch guns on this ship, a Japanese destroyer shows up, and they have no way of fighting a Japanese destroyer at this point, so they are forced to submerge and run. So they head back to Pearl. They sail into the harbor on February 7th, 1943 with a gigantic broom on top of the ship near the flag, symbolizing a clean sweep. They had sunk, or they believe they had sunk, every Japanese ship that they came across. Okay, this is huge. This is unprecedented. At this point in time, 1943, it's early in the war. America in the Pacific has just taken L after L, ass whooping after ass whooping. There's been no good news coming out of the Pacific. And then here comes the USS Wahoo sailing in, symbolizing a clean sweep with the most successful submarine war patrol of all time. Despite the fact that the submarines are literally called the Silent Service, and we don't usually talk about them, they are basically forced to push this out as headline news for propaganda purposes to show that the Americans are doing something on the Pacific front. And because of this, Mush Morton and the USS Wahoo become famous almost overnight. Mush Morton and the crew are actually allowed to give interviews to the journalists and take pictures of the USS Wahoo, which is absolutely unprecedented for submarines at this point in time, or in general. On top of that, Mush Morton gets awarded the U.S. Navy Cross and the Army Distinguished Service Cross, both of which are the second highest award in each branch, seconded only to the Medal of Honor. And the USS Wahoo receives a Presidential Unit Citation. From here, the crew gets a little bit of R&R. They get the ship refitted, reloaded, and they are back out on the sea on February 23rd, ready to kick ass. And Mush Morton now, he feels vindicated. He knows that his tactics are working. That was the best submarine run they've ever had, and it came from him being hyper-aggressive, so he's going to get even more aggressive. From here, he designates commando squads, basically boarding parties, the dudes that are going to board enemy ships with guns and take shit over if it comes to that, with his tactic of being hyper-aggressive. Now, he never actually gets to use these commando squads, but A, it highlights how aggressive he's willing to be, and B, this also sets the groundwork and the framework for other commanding officers to do the same, like Eugene Lucky Flucky and the crew of the USS Barb, when their commando squad became the only Americans during World War II to set foot on mainland Japan when they placed an IED on train tracks and blew up a fucking train. Not only that, but Mush's mission is to sail into the Yellow Sea. He is going to be the first submarine commander to do this during World War II. The Yellow Sea is exceptionally dangerous because the average depth is only 120 feet, meaning that the submarine is not going to have much luck diving deep trying to avoid depth charges if it comes to that. But it is absolutely full of Japanese ships for that exact reason. So they make their way into the Yellow Sea, and on March 19th, 1943, they detect a freighter, and Mush Morton was given a couple of a new type of torpedo that's not loaded with TNT. It's loaded with something called Torpex that is apparently 50% more effective than TRT, and it's time to try one out. So they chase this freighter down, line up the shot, and Mush Morton orders firing only one torpedo, trying to conserve as much ammo as possible. One torpedo takes off, hits the target, detonates, sinks the ship in a matter of minutes. About an hour later, they pick up another ship on radar. They chase it down, they sneak up on it, they fire 2 torpedoes, not Torpex, just the regular TNT ones. One hits, detonates, blows a hole in the ship, but not enough to sink it. Second one hits, fucking dud again. These goddamn Mark 14 torpedoes are pissing Mush Morton off. They circle back around, they fire 2 more torpedoes, another dud, and the other one veers off course. At this point, they spot the USS Wahoo, start firing shells at it. They are forced to submerge and retreat. These torpedoes are becoming the bane of Mush Morton's existence. He just wants shit to work. Later that day, they spot another freighter, sneak up on it, fire 3 torpedoes, sink that one in a matter of minutes minutes too. Then that night they spot another freighter, and this one is huge. It is 6,500 tons, the Nido Maru. They sneak up on it, fire torpedoes, sink it in 3 minutes flat. Later that night, they find another freighter filled with coal for the Japanese war effort, sneak up within 1,000 yards of it, fire a single TNT torpedo, blow that one up as well, bringing their total to guaranteed 4, potentially 5 ships in a single day. Very next morning, March 24th, they come up on another freighter. They fire 3 torpedoes. 2 of them are duds. 1 veers off course. They swing the sub around. Mush Morton's pissed. These torpedoes aren't working. Fires 2 more torpedoes from the after tubes. One of them hits, dud, and then by this point, the ship is already aware and they evade the 5th torpedo. By this point, the ship starts firing on the USS Wahoo. They are forced to dive and evade it. They track it for a little while. Then, once they think they're gone, they resurface, chase it back down again. They fire 3 more torpedoes. 1 of them is good, and it hits, and it blows up, breaks the back of this ship, sinks it in a matter of minutes. A couple hours later, they're in an area where their radar is being jammed, but they're just operating off a periscope and lookouts, and they end up spotting a Japanese ship off in the distance. They chase it down, fire 2 torpedoes. Both of them prematurely detonate. Now at this point, the USS Wahoo only has 2 torpedoes left, at which point Mush Morton doesn't want to waste them if he doesn't have to on this ship, so he kind of looks over at Dick O'Kane on the periscope and is like, hey Dick, did they got any guns on the deck of that ship? And Dick's like, not a single one, at which point Mush Morton's kind of like, Mush Morton orders them to surface the ship. They're going to sink this motherfucker with the deck guns. They roll up and just start unloading on this ship with the 4-inch guns and the 20-millimeter guns, punching this thing full of holes. It's dead in the water and burning. While this is going on, another Japanese freighter rolls up, and these guys have guns, so they think they're going to fight back. They start shooting at the USS Wahoo. USS Wahoo starts shooting back with the 5-inch and 20-millimeter guns and wrecks that ship too. Obviously, this is not as effective as a torpedo, but over the course of a couple hours, both of these freighters end up sinking. Next day, they come across this little fishing ship, but this fishing ship has this comically large communications array on it, and they're like, that's a fucking scout. So they go, they engage, they open up on it with the deck guns, and at this point, they're so close, they're hammering this little ship, but this little fucking ship just will not sink. Mush Morton sends up the commando crews, but the ship is too rough for them to actually board it. So these guys run back down into the sub, they go into the galley, they grab a bunch of liquor bottles and make homemade Molotov cocktails and start throwing the Molotovs onto this fishing ship. This little ship was just taking so much fire, Mush Morton eventually decided, like, okay, I've wasted enough ammo on this thing. It's dead in the water. We've destroyed the communication array. We're just going to move on. 3 days later, they come across 2 more little ships. They open up with gunfire. They spend over 500 rounds on these 2 little boats, and they just won't sink, but they're dead in the water and they're burning, so they move on again. That night, they're almost out of ammo for the deck guns. They've only got 2 torpedoes left, and they're figuring, okay, we're probably just going to head back to Pearl Harbor, get some more ammunition. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, they pick up a freighter on the radar. They track it till dawn. That morning, they line up their shot, fire their last 2 torpedoes, and sink that ship too. From here, they make their way back to port. They signal to Pearl Harbor their tally that they have wrecked or sank 9 enemy vessels, to which Pearl Harbor replies, congratulations, the Japanese think that there is an entire wolf pack operating in the Yellow Sea. If you don't know, that means that the USS Wahoo just fucked up so many enemy ships that the Japanese think that there's an entire fleet of submarines operating in the Yellow Sea, not just Mush Morton.
For those who don't know, with wolf packs are basically, in animal terms, a wolf pack is basically led by a leader, has multiple wolves surrounding him. He guides them, goes to town, going after weaker targets to basically eliminate and consume. But for actual U-boats and subs and whatnot, they have it's the same premise, but just with giant subs. and like with what Mush has been able to do, just basically a one-man army, the whole thing. The Japanese basically had no idea if there's like multiple ships or just they were just paranoid at this point, where they just kept seeing more and more enemy ships coming after them. So,
in the USS Wahoo,
don't really remember how many. Maybe 1.
On their way there, they actually get orders they're not going to go to Pearl Harbor. They're just going to go to Midway, pick up more ammunition, and go back on their 5th war patrol. Once they get to Midway, do the full debrief. Morton ends up getting a 2nd Navy Cross for heroism, and Dick O'Kane ends up getting a Silver Star. But then both of them get blindsided by one of their fellow officers, a guy by the name of McMillan. Now, this guy's been in submarines quite a bit longer. He's like 4 years older than Mush Morton. He's 8 years older than Dick O'Kane, and this guy's basically just butthurt that he's not running the show. So he tells Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood, oh, the missions were chaotic and they were poorly planned and things could have went better than they did, to which Mush Morton basically replies, the mission speaks for itself. It's literally the most successful war patrol of any submarine in World War II at this point, and the 2nd most successful war patrol of any war patrol in all of World War II. They were only beaten later on by the USS Tang when it was under the command of Dick O'Kane. So McMillan basically gets told to eat a dick and shut the fuck up. From here, Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood starts referring to Mush Morton as Mush the Magnificent, and then Mush Morton kind of starts pissing off a lot of other officers. One, he's getting a bunch of press coverage. Everybody's getting jealous. The spotlight's on him.
Jealousy,
the highest guy up in submarines, Lockwood, absolutely loves him. And then on top of it, Mush Morton writes a scathing letter about how ineffective these torpedoes are and how it needs to get fixed. And at this point in time, you got to realize the United States Naval Committee in charge of like the armament of ships basically has come out and said, no, there's nothing wrong with the Mark 14 torpedo. You guys just aren't good at using them, which is complete bullshit. Every submarine commander and any dude that used a torpedo in World War II acknowledges that they're a giant piece of shit. But now that this is coming from Mush Morton, the most successful submarine commander and one of the most famous war heroes of World War II, it starts making a lot of waves and pissing off a lot of high-ranking officers because now they're getting in trouble. Regardless, the Wahoo gets restocked, refitted, and sets off on its next war patrol on April 25th, 1943. This time they're getting sent up to the Aleutian Islands because apparently there's a huge Japanese fleet up there and they want the USS Wahoo to go distress the enemy.
I got you. It's better if nobody trade. You don't know anything. What are you talking about? I'll take care of it.
So they make their way up there. They identify a Japanese airstrip. Dick O'Kane, going full gung-ho, says we should start shelling this thing with the deck guns. But Mush Morton declines the offer because they're there to sink enemy ships, not announce their presence by firing shells onto an airfield. So they forego that idea. Fast forward to May 4th, they finally come across an enemy ship, and it is an auxiliary seaplane tender with a plane on top of it. Perfectly valid target. So they sneak up on it. Mush Morton gives the order. Anytime Dick fires 3 torpedoes. One of them hits, the other 2 hit, but they're duds.
God damn it!
The ship's damaged, but not enough to sink it. They start firing rounds in every direction, throwing depth charges everywhere. They don't even know where the Wahoo is, and they start trying to make their getaway. At this point in time, it's broad daylight. If they want to be able to take this thing out, they're going to have to surface and engage it, and it's not worth the risk. This thing's going to be able to fight back too well, and they decide that they're just going to stay submerged and slip away and let this one go. And at this point, Mush Morton, Dick O'Kane, everybody involved is just absolutely furious with these dud torpedoes. So from here, they head south. The weather warms up a little bit, and suddenly there's enemy ships all over the place. From here, they pick 2 freighters that seemingly don't have any sizable escort. They sneak up on them. They realize that the smaller of the 2 freighters is armed, and it is the escort for the other freighter. Despite that, they decide they're going to attack anyways. They open up by firing 6 torpedoes, 3 at each ship. 1 torpedo out of the 6 ends up connecting and actually detonating like it's supposed to, breaks the back of the regular freighter. It starts sinking, and the small escort freighter starts charging the USS Wahoo. Mush orders the emergency dive. They dive down, and the small escort drives right over the top of them, starts dropping depth charges, but they're too deep to actually affect the submarine. They make it out okay. At this point, the crew's starting to get discouraged. Mush Morton's getting pissed. He's got a reputation to uphold. Every time he fires a torpedo, 75% of the time, it's a dud. So at this point, Mush Morton greenlights the idea. They're going to take apart the torpedoes. They're going to throw out the magnetic detonator, and they're just going to set these things to detonate on impact. From here, Mush Morton gives the crew a speech. I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially says, that's it. We're done sneaking around. We're going to get right up close to these guys and punch them in the goddamn teeth with these torpedoes set to impact. Now the crew's getting fired up. They think they fixed the torpedo issue. Captain's not giving up. They're not giving up either. Sure enough, the next morning they spot 2 ships, 1 big-ass oil tanker and a freighter. They go to engage. They fire 6 torpedoes, 3 at each. The 3 fired at the tanker all detonate, blow this thing up, sink it in like under a minute. Out of the other 3, 1 hits, 1 detonates, but it snaps a spine, and that one sinks too. Both ships sink before the crew members can get out to take a picture. Bad news, they've got all kinds of shit popping up on the radar now. There's apparently a bunch of Japanese ships in the area, so they dive down as deep as they can to 300 feet and just try to wait it out. Now they know the Wahoo's in the area and they're willing to fight about it, so Morton has to change up his tactics, be a little bit more conservative. He's going to stay submerged during the day. He's only going to operate above the waterline during the night. At this point, they're running out of torpedoes, but they're trying to make the best of it. Then about a week later, on May 12th, they come across 2 more Japanese ships. They go ahead, they line up their shot. Mush Morton gives the order. Anytime, Dick, they fire 4 torpedoes, 2 at each. First set of torpedoes both hit their target, but one of them's a dud. So that ship's injured. The second set fired at the other ship are both either misses or duds again. At this point, Mush Morton's pissed. He orders them to surface the ship. He's gonna drive this torpedo right down this ship's throat. They line up their next shot above the ground. This is gonna fix any depth issues, any targeting issues. They're gonna fire this torpedo, sink this ship, and end this war patrol the right way. They fire the torpedo, direct hit. It's a fucking dud. Mush Morton orders the gun crews to go up. They're going to finish this ship off with the 4-inch guns and the 20 millimeters. As soon as they open the hatch, that other ship starts firing on the USS Wahoo, and Mush Morton makes the decision that that ship is not worth a single member of his crew. He orders them back in, and they dive down. At this point, all they can do is head back to port. That's exactly what they do. They sail into Pearl Harbor. They do not fly the broom this time. This was not a clean sweep. Mush Morton is absolutely pissed off with their performance, but Charles Lockwood, the commander, is actually pretty happy with it. By the metrics of all the other submarines that are going out right now, this is still a very successful war patrol, but Mush Morton's standards for him and his crew are just that much higher that he's not happy with it at all. Despite that, Mush Morton is issued.
It's like basically saying search for the best, get the best. You want the best of the best to help run this whole thing. You want the best munitions, you want the best crew, you want to make sure everything's done right so that you can get everything done. It's like almost your parents are basically the strict ones are wanting to get you to do well in your grades. And it's like I get a B plus in history, and like it's okay, but it's like no, you need to learn all the details, all the notes, all the references. You need to make sure you get an A this time. Don't, and like just the same thing with everything else. They're just strict, trying to get through. And yeah, I feel it for Morton to be able to, like, he's rightfully pissed for not getting the best results for his crew.
Another Navy Cross, and Dick O'Kane is given another Silver Star. Dick O'Kane is also promoted, and he is going to go get a submarine of his own, and he is going to be the commander of the new submarine, the USS Tang. So Mush Morton gets his new XO. August 1943, the Wahoo sails into the Japanese Sea. Mush Morton wants to implement a new tactic. He wants to open up by firing only 1 torpedo at a time, as opposed to the standard volley of preferably 3, but at a minimum 2. He thinks that this is going to help him conserve ammo and sink more ships per war patrol. And the plan almost immediately proves to be a tremendous failure, not because necessarily it's a bad idea, but because the torpedoes fucking suck. Every time he fires a torpedo, it's either a miss or a dud, and he only fired 1. After attempting to engage multiple ships and all the torpedoes being failures, he radios back to Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor tells him to come back. They end up offloading a bunch of the torpedoes for testing, and Charles Lockwood criticizes his technique, says you need to be firing at least 2, preferably 3 torpedoes, and then he loads the USS Wahoo with the new Mark 18 torpedo that's supposed to be more reliable. And with that, on September 9th, 1943, they take back off into the Sea of Japan, straight into the heart of enemy-held territory on an extremely dangerous mission. We don't know exactly what happened, but by October 5th, 1943, they would signal to Pearl that they had sank 3 ships in the La Perouse Strait. The La Perouse Strait at this time is an extremely dangerous area, heavily fortified by the Japanese, connecting the Japanese Sea to the Sea of Okhotsk. And unfortunately, that transmission on October 5th was the last transmission that the USS Wahoo ever sent. The USS Wahoo was supposed to send another check-in transmission on October 26th, but it never came. With that, Charles Lockwood dispatched planes and ships to check return routes, hoping to find the USS Wahoo disabled but still floating. But they never did. On November 9th, Admiral Lockwood was forced to make the announcement that Wahoo was a month late to its report time and presumed to be lost at sea with all hands. The USS Wahoo remained lost at sea until its wreckage was discovered in 2006. After examining the wreckage and comparing it to Japanese reports from that point in the war, it was determined that the USS Wahoo had sustained some type of mechanical failure or damage before the battle had actually begun, and it was leaking oil, and a Japanese plane managed to spot the oil leak, leading it directly to the silhouette of the submarine under the water. It took 60 depth charges and 40 bombs to sink the USS Wahoo and send it on its eternal patrol. Vice Admiral Lockwood blamed himself. He later wrote that he didn't think the Japanese were smart enough to catch Mush Morton and the USS Wahoo. Both Lockwood and Dick O'Kane spent the rest of their careers advocating that Mush Morton should be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Unfortunately, due to the partially successful propaganda painting him as a war criminal, as well as him pissing off a bunch of high-ranking officers over his dissatisfaction with the torpedoes, that would never come to fruition. Dick O'Kane would go on to become the most successful submarine commander in U.S. history and the only man to outperform Mush Morton in a single war patrol. And he credited much of that success to everything he had learned under the command of Mush Morton, the man and the crew that rewrote the book on submarine warfare. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch.
Man.
Over to fatelectrician.com. Quack bang. Out.
Man. That's just...
It's okay. American submariners don't die. They just stay on patrol. I'm not crying. This office is infected with onion cutting ninjas.
Man. It's such kind of sad to see how he was... Oh man. That's something else. Like seriously. He saw the flaws. He saw what was needed for his crew. He knew what was best for everything and everyone. And his popularity, his achievements, basically all the commanders, the officers, jealousy, just they did not want to have him be successful, and Lockwood and Dick O'Kane, just Dick. The man, if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have been able to do what they needed to do to achieve a great victory against the Japanese Empire and deliver all the, like, just keep on disrupting all the Japanese ships. And it's amazing to hear that, like, they even collaborated at the end to share that, like, this is what happened, this is what we did, and just I'm just shocked. But hopefully they managed to find the remains of whatever they had left and are able to return it to their loved ones. But what an incredible journey, just being able to learn all that he's done, all that he's did, and being able to successfully turn, like, basically turning a defensive weapon into a effective war asset to American ships, and just keep launching these subs out and really effectively taking down many Japanese vessels. So props to him, props to Mush, and may he and the crew of the USS, those in the crew of the USS Wahoo, rest in peace. Anyway, that is it for me, guys. I'm just the end there, just kind of like not much. It's kind of it stinks that it ends on a sad note, but you always want to look at the positives. So anyway, that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed. I'll leave a link in the description for the original video for you guys to check out. Here comes my cat. Check out the description over here for Fat Electrician over here for you guys to check out. Random video plus the subscribe button. We'd love to continue to grow closer to 2,500 subs. Subs. Anyway, I hope to catch you next time, okay? So Romans, salute.
If you like Romans content and wish to see more, like and subscribe to continue to support the channel.